On April 19, 2026, Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket lifted off for its third mission, NG-3. This was supposed to be a triumph, their first attempt at booster reuse on an orbital flight. Instead, the second stage failed to achieve sufficient thrust, turning a critical mission into a billion-dollar mistake. Jeff Bezos founded Blue Origin with the promise of making space travel routine, but this isn't the first setback. In 2025, the debut New Glenn flight had a mishap during descent. So, what went wrong this time? And why is this particular failure so critical for Blue Origin's future? We're going to dig into the specifics of the NG-3 anomaly, what it means for companies like AST SpaceMobile, who had payloads on board, and whether Blue Origin can still catch up in the new space race. On April 19, 2026, Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket launched for its third mission, NG-3. It was a critical flight, carrying a payload for AST SpaceMobile, and was the first attempt at reflying a New Glenn booster. What happened next wasn't exactly an explosion, but it was a very public, multi-million-dollar failure that ground Blue Origin's orbital launch program to a halt. Now, almost 2 months later, the Federal Aviation Administration has approved Blue Origin's investigation into the NG-3 anomaly, clearing the way for New Glenn to fly again. This isn't just a story about a single rocket mishap. It's a peek behind the curtain at the cutthroat private space industry. We're going to dissect what went wrong with New Glenn's second stage, why this particular failure matters so much to Blue Origin's long-term ambitions, and what lessons a company like SpaceX has already learned that Blue Origin is still grappling with. This isn't just about a broken rocket. It's about a multi-billion-dollar bet on the future of space and whether a private company can truly disrupt the old guard. New Glenn, a 321-foot-tall, 98-meter orbital-class rocket, is more than just a big piece of hardware for Blue Origin and its founder, Jeff Bezos. Named after astronaut John Glenn, it's the centerpiece of a multi-billion-dollar bet on a future where millions of people live and work in space. This isn't just about putting satellites into orbit. It's about establishing the infrastructure for human expansion beyond Earth. The rocket's scale reflects this ambition. Its first stage alone is powered by 7B-4 engines, fueled by methane, an advanced propulsion system designed for heavy lift and, crucially, reusability. On April 19, 2026, the NG-3 mission was supposed to be a significant step in validating that reusability, the first attempt to refly a New Glenn booster. The idea is to make access to space routine, much like commercial air travel. Blue Origin has been competing fiercely in the commercial space race, vying for major contracts from NASA and the U.S. Space Force, as well as commercial satellite operators like AST SpaceMobile, whose Bluebird 7 satellite was on board the NG-3 mission. These contracts are worth hundreds of millions of dollars each, and consistent, reliable launches are paramount. So, while the first stage successfully returned to its downrange landing platform on NG-3, demonstrating critical reusability, the upper stage failure was a major setback. It pushed back their ambitious schedule and reminded everyone that even with deep pockets, space is incredibly hard. This takes us to the turbulent beginnings of New Glenn. On January 16, 2025, a date etched into the annals of commercial spaceflight, New Glenn 1, Blue Origin's much-anticipated debut orbital rocket, soared successfully into orbit from Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This monumental achievement, witnessed by millions through live streams and dedicated space enthusiasts like Dr. Eris Thorne, validated years of development, demonstrating unequivocally that the towering 98-meter vehicle could indeed deliver its payload to the unforgiving vacuum of space. The launch itself was flawless, exceeding all initial ascent performance parameters. However, the mission's celebratory tone quickly shifted during the critical descent phase. Initial telemetry suggested an anomaly, which was later confirmed. The rocket lost its entire B-4 powered lower stage during re-entry, a significant mishap that immediately cast a shadow over the ambitious reusability design philosophy underpinning New Glenn. Blue Origin's post-flight analysis, led by Chief Engineer Dr. Lena Petrova, swiftly identified the root cause. The first stage's 7B, 4 engines failed to relight for the crucial controlled landing burn, rendering it uncontrollable and leading to its structural breakup over the Atlantic. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, through its Office of Commercial Space Transportation, initiated a mandatory investigation into the newglenn 1 incident, ultimately accepting Blue Origin's thorough internal findings. While achieving orbit was an undeniable technical triumph, the inability to recover and reuse that immensely expensive first stage represented a substantial early setback. The very core tenet of newglenn, much like SpaceX's highly successful Falcon 9 program, hinges on the promise of cost efficiency derived from routine reusability. A single-use rocket, even one that successfully reached orbit, fundamentally undermines that foundational economic philosophy. This incident undeniably amplified the pressure for subsequent flights, where demonstrating reliable reusability would become not just an engineering goal, but an existential imperative for newglenn's long-term viability in the competitive launch market. On April 19, 2026, precisely at 7:25 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Blue Origin's newglenn rocket embarked on its third mission, NG-3, lifting off from Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida. This flight carried immense significance, not only for its primary payload, AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 satellite, a crucial component for their global cellular broadband network, but also as the maiden attempt to refly a newglenn booster. The B-4, powered first stage, named Calypso for this mission, executed its complex descent sequence flawlessly, returning to a precise vertical landing on the Autonomous Landing Platform, Orbital Landing Platform 1, OLP-1, in the Atlantic Ocean, unequivocally demonstrating the reusability cornerstone of Blue Origin's long-term strategy for sustained orbital access. However, the jubilation was short-lived. The critical issue manifested with the newglenn's second stage, the GS-2. Prior to its planned second burn, a vital maneuver designed to circularize the orbit and propel the Bluebird 7 into its precise 700-kilometer operational altitude, telemetry indicated that one of the single B-3U vacuum-optimized engines failed to achieve sufficient thrust. As veteran aerospace journalist and NSS Space Coast correspondent Bert Dite detailed in his immediate reports, this NG-3 anomaly represented a profound setback. Blue Origin CEO Dave Limp subsequently confirmed that early data pointed to a propulsion irregularity within the upper stage. The repercussions were immediate and severe. The AST SpaceMobile Bluebird 7 satellite was left stranded in an unusable, significantly lower than intended transfer orbit, rendering it a total loss. In response, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, promptly initiated an investigation and issued a grounding order for the entire newglenn rocket program. This critical upper stage malfunction, coming right after the hard-won successes of the first 2 newglenn flights in late 2025 and early 2026, brought Blue Origin's ambitious orbital launch cadence to an abrupt halt, starkly illustrating that even partial success cannot mask total mission failure. Now, almost 2 months after the NG-3 upper stage failure, Blue Origin suffered an even more catastrophic incident. On Thursday, May 28, 2026, at approximately 9:07 p.m. Eastern Time, a newglenn Block 1 rocket, specifically Booster 17, exploded during a full-duration static hotfire test at Orbital Launch Site 1, OLS-1, at Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Imagine the scene. Just as all 7B-4 engines ignited for the planned 70-second test burn, instead of the controlled, thunderous roar expected from 1.7 million pounds of thrust, there was a sudden, massive fireball, erupting violently. This cataclysmic event was not only captured by facility cameras, but also by numerous amateur videos from Cocoa Beach, later widely shared by media outlets like NASA Spaceflight and Space News, painting a stark picture of the disaster. This wasn't a minor anomaly. The incident completely obliterated the massive 7-meter diameter booster and its integrated second stage. To add to the devastation, the primary lightning protection tower, a 60-meter structure vital for the launch complex's safety, collapsed spectacularly in the concussive blast. Blue Origin's terse official statement only confirmed a test stand anomaly, with no personnel injuries, but the visual evidence and the total loss of flight-ready hardware spoke volumes. This was, without exaggeration, an incident costing well over $1 billion. It wasn't just the estimated $350 million cost of the rocket itself, but the immense financial and programmatic impact of losing a nearly flight-ready vehicle, setting back an already troubled launch schedule by at least 18 to 24 months, and forcing a complete reevaluation of their extensive testing protocols. This kind of setback goes beyond financial balance sheets. It hits at the core confidence in the entire newglenn program and its ability to compete in the increasingly cutthroat launch market against industry giants like SpaceX's Falcon Heavy and ULA's Vulcan Centaur. We'll dive into what this teaches us about the path forward amidst such significant setbacks. On May 22, 2026, just days before the static fire explosion, the FAA officially approved Blue Origin's investigation into the NG-3 mission failure, clearing newglenn to resume launches. This is a critical point. The regulatory body gave a green light, yet less than a week later, we witnessed the booster's 17 catastrophic static fire. It underscores a paradox inherent in rocket development. Even after rigorous internal investigations and external approvals, the path to reliable spaceflight is paved with unexpected challenges. This sequence of events, as Bert Deit, NSS Space Coast correspondent, reported on April 20, 2026, regarding the NG-3 upper stage failure, highlights the immense complexity. These setbacks aren't just technical blips. They have profound implications for Blue Origin's competitive standing against rivals like SpaceX. While SpaceX has demonstrated consistent reusability and a high flight cadence with its Falcon 9, newglenn's repeated anomalies, from the NG-1 descent mishap to the NG-3 upper stage failure, and now the static fire explosion, create significant timeline delays. Each incident triggers a fresh round of investigations, redesigns, and retesting, escalating development costs, and pushing back the operational launch window. This isn't just about a single rocket. It's about the broader perception of reliability and the ability to fulfill crucial contracts, like the one with AST SpaceMobile for their Bluebird 7 satellite, which was part of the ill-fated NG-3 mission. What this teaches us is that even for a well-funded venture like Blue Origin, backed by Jeff Bezos, the inherent risks of pushing the boundaries of space exploration remain formidable. Ultimately, what these incidents at Blue Origin highlight is the brutal calculus of orbital rocketry in 2026. This isn't just about technical glitches. It's about hundreds of millions, if not billions, of dollars in sunk costs, market position against competitors like SpaceX, and the very credibility of a company that has been developing newglenn for over a decade. The NG-3 upper stage failure and the Booster 17 explosion aren't just isolated events. They're stark reminders that even with immense capital and engineering talent, getting to orbit reliably and repeatably remains one of humanity's toughest challenges. It underscores the critical tension between the speed required to capture market share and the meticulous, slow pace demanded by safety and reliability. Have you ever been part of a project with a critical failure where the post-mortem revealed surprising underlying issues, even after extensive testing? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you're tracking the bleeding edge of business, tech, and the complex interplay between innovation and risk, make sure you're subscribed. And if you're looking for more breakdowns of what these high-stakes engineering battles mean for the broader economy, my deep dive into the ongoing space launch provider consolidation is exactly the next thing you should watch.